Hello, Waffle lovers, and welcome to another episode of Whatever Flips Your Waffle here on 365sportscast.com. I'm your host, Mark Domeyer, coming to you, as always, from the bunker deep in the heart of southern Minnesota. There's plenty to talk about this week with the Twins, the Lynx, a little bit of everything here in Minnesota. I'm glad you've decided to tune in and listen to this insight into Minnesota sports. Welcome to those of you who tune in each and every week on Wednesday evenings or on YouTube, and to those of you checking us out for the first time. Sit back, relax, prepare yourself for another helping of waffles, syrup optional. We're going to get right to the interview this week. It's jam-packed with good Twins insight. This week I talked to John Swol, who runs TwinsTrivia.com. Let's get right to it. Joining the program this week on 365sportscast.com, I've got John Swol. He runs TwinsTrivia.com. And if you're wondering sometimes where the Waffle Flipper gets all his on this day in Minnesota sports history, a lot of that sometimes comes from that. If it relates to the Twins, I probably found it at TwinsTrivia.com. A lot of great information there on the Twins. John, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of things, and as I have cruised around your website over the last few months, I found a lot of really interesting things as a Twins fan. You can also follow John on Twitter at STOKE. And John, you proclaim to be a Twins fan since '61, a Twins believer. What was it like to be here in Minnesota in 1961 when the Twins came to town?
Well, actually, I started following baseball in 1957, back when the only way you could really get Major League Baseball in our area in Taylor's Falls, where I grew up, just north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, was on my little transistor radio, and I would listen to the Braves games, and that's how I became a baseball fan. And in '57, the Braves ended up going to the World Series and beating the Yankees. And I always hated the Yankees, and that was really a good thing. But I had some, the Braves had some really great players back then, and then, I kept following the Braves, and then when the Minnesota Twins came to town, and I kind of switched my allegiance to our home team and started following the American League, and that was a lot of fun. It just, being able to listen to baseball is, because we didn't have but a small black and white TV, and that wasn't until I was, probably in mid-'60s.
Okay.
So I didn't get to watch any of the Twins games early on.
Okay.
I was more of a radio listener, and that's how I came to appreciate listening to baseball on the radio.
And I think there's so many of us, and you're a little bit older than I am, but I grew up too listening to the games. They weren't on TV very often when I was a youngster, and so tuning into WCCO was always a thrill when it came to that. So it struck me, if you were a Braves fan to start, and certainly beating the hated Yankees is always a good thing. In '91, did you have any torn allegiances when the Twins faced the Braves? Any lingering remorse?
No, not at all. At that point, I'm a full-fledged Twins fan, and the Braves and their tomahawk chop were a little bit too much for me.
And I could say, from having been to Game 1 of the World Series in '91, they pretty much eliminated that chop pretty quickly at the Metrodome. Prior to the Twins coming to Minnesota, having been the Washington Senators, there were minor league teams there, the Minneapolis Millers and stuff like that. Could you sense, were you of an age where you could sense just how important a change this was to become a major league town?
Oh, it was a big deal. Everybody wanted, the Twins were really the first major league team to come to Minnesota.
Right.
And, outside, there was Minneapolis Lakers and so forth, so you got to give them credit for that in basketball. But everybody wanted pro baseball in Minnesota, and when that finally came to pass, it was huge. And what I found interesting was, how baseball fans attended games back then, where men were dressed in their suit and tie, and women were all dressed up, and compared to the way that people attend baseball games today.
Yeah, it was truly an event back then for most people.
Sure was.
Yeah, like going to church on Sunday or a big party or something.
Yep.
Yeah. So your initial reaction to Met Stadium as a big league ballpark back in '61, it was built before then, but when it became a true big league ballpark, what was the reaction to that?
Well, I don't know if anybody, most fans had anything to compare it to, so everybody thought it was great. I didn't get to attend a game live at Met Stadium until 1965, and my very first experience with a baseball game at Met Stadium was the 1965 All-Star game.
Oh, wow.
And that was kind of a strange thing because in '65 I was a senior in high school. Had just graduated. I was getting ready to go into the Navy in August, and so a couple of us were sitting around talking and saying, well, the All-Star game's going to be on tomorrow, at the Met. Why don't we get out there, drive up there, and go to the game? Not even giving a second thought to, are there any tickets available or anything like that. So 3 or 4 of us got into the car, drove up to the cities, and were able to get standing room tickets under the left field bleachers at the time. And so that was my first experience with Met Stadium, but I still remember walking into it, and I had the very same reaction I think that millions of other people have had. The first time you walk into a big league ballpark, what seems to strike you first is how green the grass is.
Yeah, right.
It was just strange, but it was amazing, and it was quite the experience. And that All-Star game was, the Hall of Famers that played in that, number of players that played in that game was amazing.
Right. To be able to look back and say, I was there and I got to see all these, because that was a time period where no interleague play. You only got a chance to see those National League players in the All-Star game, or if your team made the World Series.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I was able to attend a game at Met Stadium myself in its last season. And by then, the reviews weren't quite as good anymore, and everybody was looking forward to this great big Metrodome that we were going to build.
Well, a lot of people were, and a lot of people were vehemently against it, as you may have read or seen articles about that. People were pretty upset because the Metrodome was pretty much strictly a football stadium, and I don't know if you've read the book that Dick Bremer had written about a year ago. Yep,
very good.
It is, and I'm just reading it, and I was surprised, that he mentioned in one of his little snippets there that Calvin Griffith, was in spring training of the year they were supposed to start playing in the Dome, and they found out that they forgot all about the bullpens.
Oh, right, yeah.
And had nothing ready there, and then they finally decided to just kind of put him down the third baseline and the first baseline.
Which, when you look at the modern stadiums today, and very few stadiums still have that setup, of course.
Right.
I'm thinking like Tampa Bay does, I think, in that stadium, what they call a stadium down there, but it's always dangerous. In Oakland, too, I think they still have that down the baselines.
Yeah. I found it, kind of interesting to have in the Metrodome, the visitors' bullpen down the right field line, because as it turned out, we had season tickets then, and we were right there at that visitors' bullpen, and we were in the first row. There was only 2 seats in the first row the way it was configured. So we didn't have anybody walking in front of us or anything besides, the usher that kind of stood there. But it was always fun to see the visitors' pitchers warming up there. And, they'd throw you a ball all the time.
Right.
It was just wonderful. And then when Target Field came along, how they assigned the seats, I always thought it was questionable and unfair, but we ended up sitting way away from the field compared to what we had at the Metrodome.
Okay. And Target Field, obviously, of all the stadiums the Twins have played in, by far and away the best stadium.
Sure.
What was your reaction the first time you walked into Target Field then?
I was just kind of amazed at how they got so much into a small area. When they were building that, they had kind of a camera on the location, and so you were able to follow it as they were building the ballpark. That was fun to see, and you can still find that out on the internet. And they've got it where you can play it like the whole building process that took a couple years in about a minute on a video, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, the old time lapse type of thing.
Right.
Yeah. I know that the first few times of going to Target Field, I spent a lot of time walking around just exploring because it has such great sight lines that I could stop anywhere and watch the game action, and then kind of keep looking around and everything too.
A lot different than than watching a game from the Dome, for sure.
Yeah. If you went to use the bathroom or you went to a concession stand, you had no idea what was happening except for the little TVs that they had up at different locations. Yeah. Have you had a chance to go to other stadiums around Major League Baseball at all?
Yeah, because when I was in the Navy, I was at the Great Lakes for my boot camp and schooling, and so I went to the old Comiskey Park, caught some games, White Sox games there. They used to back then, they used to let the military people in for free.
Okay.
We went out there, and then since then we've traveled around a little bit. We've gone out to Seattle to catch a game out there. We've driven down to Kansas City a couple times to catch some games down there. We've been to the old Atlanta ballpark that went before this newest one that they got built. We've been to Wrigley Field, where we about froze to death on that fall evening. But the wind coming off that lake is wickedly cold.
Oh, I'm sure.
Had experienced that on a previous occasion.
Okay. Well, I got a chance to go to Seattle last summer, and we've been to Kansas City as well, and I'd love to go back to Kansas City. Fantastic.
And they're talking now about possibly building a new ballpark.
Are they really? Oh my goodness!
Yeah, crazy.
I love Kauffman Stadium. It's got that vintage feel, but it's still got some modern amenities, and their little Hall of Fame in there is nice to walk through too. So, that was a lot of fun. So you were in the Navy. John Swol is with us on the program this week. He was in the Navy from '65 to '68, and right as the Twins started to, 65, go to the World Series, they were contenders all those years. How difficult was it to follow your team while you were with the military?
Well, back then when you were in the military, it wasn't like it is today with the internet and everything. So
right.
I wasn't able to follow the team at all. In '65, after I graduated from school in May, I went joined the Navy on the buddy plan with a friend of mine from school, and his birthday was in August, and the plan we went in under was you go in before you're 18 and you get out before you're 21. And so since his 18th birthday was in August, we had to go in at the beginning of August, and so I missed out almost all of the second half of the '65 season, and the entire World Series. We were in boot camp and in schools. You had really nothing except reading about things in the paper, or getting a subscription to the sporting news like I did. But even that, sometimes that arrived and sometimes that didn't.
Right. I suppose. And depending...
Somebody else found it more interesting and kept it.
Maybe that's what's happened to my Star Tribune the last few Sundays. Yeah, and I suppose that if you moved around and stuff too, trying to have that follow you could be a little difficult. But you eventually got news that they lost to the Los Angeles Dodgers that year.
Right. And, and then, once I left, I was in boot camp in the fall of, through the fall of that year. And then I was in Radar A school at Great Lakes. I spent the winter of '65 into '66 there. And then in April of '66, I ended up getting assigned to a aircraft carrier, the USS Shangri-La CBA-38, out of Mayport, Florida. And so then we were off, on various cruises a couple times over to the Mediterranean and so forth over the years. And you just didn't have those kind of communications back then as what the service personnel are able to have nowadays, and be able to Zoom with their families or whatever.
Right.
It just didn't exist. I remember we were over in the Mediterranean. I called home for Christmas one year from Italy, and it cost, you had payphones. It cost me, I think, like back then, $35 to talk from there to Minnesota for 3 minutes.
Wow. Wow.
And, we weren't paid a lot of money back then.
No. So it was even more of a sacrifice and a commitment to be in our military back then, without all the modern amenities we have today. Yeah. Well, we appreciate the service that you gave our country as well, and see the world, but miss out on baseball, I guess. During all these times, we've seen a lot of changes in Major League Baseball, and I know as I was putting together the program that you're on for this week, and on your site, the coming up this week is the anniversary in 1968 where Major League Baseball announced American League West and American League East, and here's the teams that are going to be in them. So we look at things like that change, adding the designated hitter, all these continued expansion, other rule changes. Do you mind these changes? Are you we wish it was the way it used to be, or do you see good in the way things have changed over the years?
Well, a little bit of both, I guess. I'm more of a traditionalist, so I do not like a lot of the changes that have taken place. But, some of the things that maybe are even coming, like the automated balls and strikes that I would expect to see soon, I guess I'm for that. I want some of the umpires and some of the calls they make, and, it sure would be nice to see it standardized and make it a little bit more fair for everybody. But at the same time, I miss baseball the way it was played versus the way it is now. Although here in Minnesota this year, they seem to kind of be reverting back a little bit and have maybe given up a little bit on the hitting the home runs. To me, seeing either home runs or strikeouts isn't real baseball.
No.
And so I'm hoping it goes back. You're starting to see. I was watching the game last night. There was a couple sacrifices, and in the last week, they probably had more sacrifice bunts and flies and things like that than they've had in the last year or two combined.
Yeah. And there's something to be said. That's a skill when prior to this year, when you'd watch guys try to turn around and square to bunt, it was almost painful, like they don't understand the basics. And I think back as a former baseball coach, it's one of the things we used to work on at the start of the season, because you never know when your ability to bunt could make the difference in a game.
Absolutely, and the shift. I've never been a big fan of that. I expect to see my third baseman in a certain spot, and my shortstop in a certain spot, and I'm still confused by what they're doing. With the shift and how they're scoring. They've got the third baseman covering second base or whatever, and so when you see the play in a box score, you don't really know what happened.
Right.
I mean, you don't. It just is confusing. Whereas before, if you knew that it was thrown to, from 1 to 6 or whatever, you knew where the ball was going and what base he was covering.
Right.
But that's not always the case anymore.
No, I've always thought it would be more difficult to turn some double plays when your third baseman's so far over, your shortstop's where your second baseman used to be. And and for you as well, I'm sure, as me growing up, the shift was you had a lefty up and everybody kind of moved a little bit toward right, and that's it.
Yep.
that was the shift.
Yep.
And it sounds like that's going to go away next year. I'm with you on the automated umpire, and I'm an umpire myself, and it's hard. It's a hard job, and I can't imagine watching these guys throw 90, 100 miles an hour and trying to judge that ball. And, overall they do very well, but when they don't, everybody notices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at the umpires, and my wife and I, watch the Twins games and stuff, and you'll see a close play at first base or something. Almost all the time, and then they miss sometimes.
Right.
I'm not saying they don't, but when I watch it in real time, whether it's because you're watching it on TV or whatever, but I wouldn't have gotten that right anywhere close to the percentage time those guys do.
Yeah, I like to tell people that I miss one call a game. I'm just not going to tell them which one it was. So
I like that.
So after and being a lifelong Twins fan, or Twins fan since their beginning, 65 disappointment, 69 and 70 they win the Western Division and then lose to the Baltimore Orioles. What did it feel like after all of that, and then some really down years in the 70s and 80s? All of a sudden, 87 and 91 roll around. How did it feel to be able to root on a champion finally?
And the way it turned out, no one really had expectations of going to a World Series in '87.
Right.
It just kind of happened, and no one thought that they were gonna beat the Tigers or whatever in the playoffs. But they did all those things, and things just seemed to go their way. It was amazing, and I was able to go to a World Series game in both 87 and 91. So it was really a super fun experience. And then I went to live close enough here that when they were coming back after having won the playoffs, and all those people showed up at the Metrodome.
All right.
I was one of those people, and out there in the left field corner, it was just crazy.
Awesome.
It was just so much fun, and all the people, when you wandered around coming back from that event, all the people that were celebrating in their cars, all the horns were honking, and people were hanging out car windows yelling and screaming. It was quite the thing.
Yeah, and who would have thought, here we are over 30 years later, and we haven't sniffed the World Series. I mean, American League Championship Series 1 year, but we're just, maybe this is the year, because nobody expected it, right?
Yeah. I'm not surprised that they have a good team. I thought last year was just kind of a fluke, and how bad everything went. But yet, I certainly wouldn't have predicted that they would be as good as the way they're playing
Right.
to this point.
Yeah, we've got John Swol with us here on the program. He runs a website, twinstrivia.com. I encourage you to check that out. A lot of really great twin stuff on there. John, how did the website come about when you started that process?
Well, the website kind of came after a book I wrote called Twins Trivia. Back in the 90s, mid-90s or so, there was a talk, Twins weren't drawing well, there was talk of them moving and so forth. And over the years, I had kind of taken some notes about the Twins and jotted down some events that I thought were interesting and so forth. And I thought, well, if I wanted to write a book before they moved, and I didn't have enough time to write. I didn't know, I guess I didn't know what kind of book I wanted to write, and I finally decided that the easiest thing to do for someone that had never written a book was to write kind of a Twins trivia book. And so I put together a bunch of questions and answers, and back then self-publishing wasn't a big deal at all, or was a big deal. It just didn't happen very often, and
Right.
you couldn't get someone certainly to pay you for it. So I ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of Bob Pyle, who was in advertising at one time with the Baltimore Orioles, and he lived here in the cities, and he was a good friend of Herb Carneal.
Okay.
And so he thought that the book was kind of interesting, and he said he would help me self-publish the book. And so that's what we did. I got the book self-published, and it came out. And then a couple years later, the internet kind of came on stronger, and I started to fiddle with it a little bit and thought that I could get a website, and I would name it after the book that I had written.
Right.
And that's how that came to be. And so I started, building a website was a little bit more cumbersome back then. And this was probably around 2003, 2004 when I first started it. And Microsoft, I think, had some kind of a deal going on that would allow me to do that, and I started that. But after that, I was getting ready, thinking about retiring, and I retired in 2007. I needed something to do, and so I thought, well, my website and baseball can keep me busy and out of mischief. And so I've been running a website, or this website, pretty much ever since.
Okay. Where do you get all your information? You got a lot of course, the internet helps, but links to some Star Trib stories and stuff, but just a lot of good information about different games and events that happened with the Twins.
Well, I've done a lot of research. Some of the information, I had saved over the years from different articles on different players or different teams. And I'm doing research all the time. And right now, it started out as just the kind of the highlight of my website was going to be the this day in Twins history.
Right.
And I didn't want to have a website that, since I was by myself, that I could write articles all the time, because I don't have the time to do that. And if you don't have new material that you can add on a fairly regular basis, then you tend not to have very many readers. And so I thought this was the way to go. I'm always on the lookout. I'm always adding new things. And then part of the process was, that I kind of converted over to in the On This Day portion of the website was that I started doing short synopsises of the games for each of the days. And so I've got probably a couple thousand game recaps out there for the various days, and I'm trying. Some years I've got every single game. Other years I don't have as many, and I'd like to get them all over time, but I don't know if I'm going to live that long.
Well, we can hope. I've like 61. Certainly, there's a lot of stuff in more recent years you've got, and you've been tracking or you've tracked all the games they missed when the COVID pandemic hit and everything like that too. But I find it really fascinating, and a lot of times I'll read one and go, oh yeah, I remember that game, and it's just some strange offhand game from May of whatever year, and think, oh yeah, I remember that happening, or it's a nice little reminder that, hey, I saw that game, or I listened to it, or whatever the case might be.
And that's kind of what is behind the idea. I want to. Well, first of all, I guess I want my website to be the Twins' go-to website to look up historical information. And so that's why I have a lot of the history stuff that's out there. But I want fans to be able to look at that and say, hey, I was at that game. I remember that now. And I'm interested when people make comments back and say, this happened to me, or I ran into this player, or whatever. To me, those are the kind of the fun things about baseball that it's interesting to get their viewpoints on.
Right. And I've done that when I bring some of those things onto my program here. I remember I was at the Scott Erickson no-hitter, for example, and when we ran across that, that's one of those pure luck kind of a thing. That I was in college and we went up to the game, and but it brought back some great memories. That that's the date it was on, because I'm not sure I still have my ticket stub. I might if I dig somewhere. And there's another thing that ticket stubs are kind of going by the wayside too. You get everything electronically, and there's something about that, to have my ticket stub from the '91 World Series, or I got a chance to go to the home run derby at Target Field when the All-Star game was here. Those are awesome to me.
Absolutely, and it's sad that tickets are going by the wayside. It's all electronic now, and people enjoyed the tickets and the memories that went with it. I mean, ball clubs even, and I don't know why they're kind of getting away from it besides the cost, but when a special event happened at your ballpark, fans from all over the country sometimes wrote in and bought a ticket just to say that they had, a ticket from that particular game, even though they didn't attend. But still, it was a big deal. They could use a ticket to get an autograph. A lot of things. It's a shame. Yeah,
and that's. But it's funny. My wife and I were just talking the other day about when we pass on someday and all this stuff that we've collected, like my old tickets and stuff like that. What are my kids going to do with that? And I said, well, they'll probably just throw that stuff away. Unfortunately, it's a different generation that's happening right now. There's a lot of other things on your website too. It's not just the on this day, but you have a lot of other things. And again, I think Twins fans would really love if they check out twinstrivia.com. You're going to find a ton of stuff there. John, what is it about nostalgia that really resonates and just brings that smile to our face? As you and I are talking and we're remembering this and remembering that, what makes that just such a great, unique experience?
I guess for me, it's just the fact that you're looking at something that you really enjoy, and I enjoy the game of baseball, and to be able to bring back something from 20 years ago or 30 years ago and say, God, I remember that, and that was a fun time, and and sometimes those kind of memories jog even other things that are other memories that are a lot of fun to remember.
Right.
Or maybe you went to a ball game with somebody that's no longer with us, or all those kind of things.
Yeah, and even if it's a loss, even if it's something that's negative, that still can be a really, really awesome thing. And I know spending time with my family, both my parents when I was younger and now my own children, those are the kind of things, even if it's that it was really hot at Target Field one day and my son got heat sickness. It's a memory, and it's important for us to remember. And just because we miss seeing Jim Thome hit the longest home run in Target Field history, but it's still one of those good memories that we have.
Absolutely, and what's fun about baseball, I think, whether you watch it on TV or you watch it in person, is you never know what you're going to see on that given day.
Yes.
I mean, like you mentioned, the no-hitter that you got to see. Of all the games I've attended, I've never seen a no-hitter.
Right.
I've never been at a game that's had a triple play, but I've seen those things on TV.
Yep.
But yet, you just don't know the plays that still happen that you wonder, why haven't I ever seen that?
Yeah.
And it's just an interesting game.
Well, that's in any sport, really. I always say that it's better than reality TV because it's true reality, because you don't know what you're going to see, no matter if it's football, basketball, baseball, whatever.
Absolutely. And history's made every day. You just don't realize it.
Right. Yes. That's a great point. Yeah. John Swol is with us here on Whatever Flips Your Waffle at 365sportscast.com. We mentioned a little bit earlier the Twins this year, maybe a little bit of a surprise, though you thought last year was maybe more of an aberration. Injuries, everything else last year too. But it seems like, to me, some of the players that maybe faltered last year, they got pulled into emergency situations, weren't quite ready for the big leagues yet, are doing some positive things for the Twins this year.
Yes, and I guess the biggest surprise to me is the pitching. Everybody was, just shocked that the Twins didn't really do anything over the off season to get some good starting pitching. They signed, a couple players, a couple pitchers, but no one had really high expectations for them. But yet, they've held up pretty well. Bundy's had some issues now. Sometimes the season just starts out poorly and it just seems like one thing leads to another and things just go to pot. And that's the way I guess I saw last season. Whereas this year you're seeing it pretty much just the opposite. One guy's doing well and it seems to be contagious, and other players continue to do well. And if you think you're going to do well, I think that it kind of leads on, and other players feel the same way. It catches on, and it's crazy how it works out.
Yeah. Well, last year they had a lot of blown leads late in games, and that wears on you too. And while that's happened a couple times this year, more so, we call it the Emilio Pagan experience here. Brings back shades of Ron Davis at times when he would close for the Twins, but somehow they find a way to get it done. And what the thing is this year that I see is you're beating the teams you should. Taking care of the Oakland Athletics, taking care of the Kansas City, Detroit. Those are the games you should win, you do. And June will be a tougher stretch, I think, with the Yankees and the Rays again and some other really quality teams. Everybody's got an opinion, too, on Royce Lewis and his call-up and then demotion. And what do you think about the young man?
For me, personally, I wasn't at all surprised that he got sent back down. He seems to be like he's going to be a great prospect and an excellent ball player down the line. But, when you got Correa, I just don't know where you could put him. And to me, Lewis is so young, you can't have him sitting on the bench. He's got to be playing. And to me, he has to be playing the position that they expect him to play down the line. That appears to be shortstop. So, you can have him over at third base for a little bit, but, I I want to see him playing, and I want to see him playing the position he's going to play in the big leagues.
Right.
Whether they're going to have to, if they sign Correa or they manage to keep him, he doesn't opt out, if they sign him to a long-term deal. All those things are, the odds are those aren't going to happen. But it could.
Right.
Correa could stay. But I think he's a smart guy, and he says he loves being in the Twin Cities. So, he's no dummy.
Yeah.
That's the way to treat it. And whether he's going to stay or leave, I don't think anybody's going to find out until that day comes.
You're absolutely right. And really, with Urshela's been solid at third base. I don't have a lot of problems with him there. I guess if Correa did sign long term, I would say, okay, well, now if we want Royce Lewis and he's going to be good, and then he's got to learn third base or maybe first base, or I don't know what, but he's got to learn something because they're going to need him in the future. John, we sure appreciate you joining the program this week. Twins past and present, twinstrivia.com, that's where you want to go. And with Memorial Day coming up, John, I really want to thank you for your service in the Navy in the 60s and serving our country. And I appreciate what you've done as a veteran, and I appreciate what you've done to kind of maintain the history of the Twins.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate having the being able to spend some time with you today, and I hope that maybe we can get together again and see how things are going as the season progresses.
Sounds like a plan. John Swol, check him out, twinstrivia.com, or on Twitter at STOKE. If you are interested in sponsoring the program, whatever flips your waffle, I encourage you to get a hold of me, waffleflipper22 at gmail.com or at Mr. D1973 on Twitter. We can chat a little bit, develop some advertising for your business. $25 will get you a sponsorship, and myself and the waffle flipping public would appreciate that. And now it's time for the State of Minnesota Sports. First, a local note. If you remember Andrew Phillips, New Richland, Heartland, Ellendale, Geneva baseball star that we had on the program a little while back, he announced this past week that he has signed a letter of intent to play baseball at Division I South Dakota State University. He will be a Jackrabbit. So congratulations to Andrew. All his hard work is paying off, and he'll have a chance to compete at that Division I level. So we'll keep an eye on that in the years to come. He's only a junior this year, so he's got another year of high school left, but it'll be an exciting time for Mr. Phillips, that's for sure. Let's start this week, following that, of course, with the Timberwolves, who are in the news. Hiring new president Tim Conley, hiring him away from the Denver Nuggets of all places, a fellow Western Conference foe. He got 5 years, $40 million. He gets equity in the team as well, some ownership equity, pretty big thing. And this was a question going with the Timberwolves is, where are you going to go? The executive vice president, Mr. Gupta, had been running the team since they had fired the previous president, and done a fine job, got along well with Chris Finch and the coaching staff and the players. He will keep his position. He'll still be working closely with the team, but they're bringing in a guy who has made the Denver Nuggets a consistent contender in his time there. And one has to wonder, is he just at the point where can't seem to, push the Nuggets to that last vista, and I want to start a new project? Maybe he sees in the Timberwolves that rough idea of a potential championship team, the same as he saw when he went to Denver, and really developed them into every year you can count on them being in the playoffs and contending a little bit. And maybe he sees that with the Timberwolves and wants to do the same thing here. So that's pretty big news. The ownership, both old and new, has made this a priority that we're going to talk about being competitive. We're going to talk about being a professional franchise. Not something that we've necessarily always seen from the Timberwolves kind of meander around. And so this is exciting news if you're a Timberwolves fan, that they look like they're on their way to really being a respectable organization all the way through. And I think a lot of this is, Glenn Taylor's been a fine owner, but he's just sort of kind of sat back and said I own an NBA team. And now when you have Mr. Lore and Mr. Rodriguez coming in next year to take over, well, it's time. They're not buying a franchise just to say they have one. Alex Rodriguez has been a winner his whole life, even if he cheated sometimes to do that. But they want to make sure that they have that opportunity. So that's an exciting idea from the Timberwolves, that's for sure. The Vikings as well. We look back on some OTAs and some rookie coming into town and everything else, and a lot of things coming out of the Vikings. Things like Zadarius Smith has really impressed people. He's just been crazy is the word that Dalvin Cook used to describe him, and the work ethic that he has and everything else. He's kind of been told, hey, it's just we're not even to preseason yet. Let's ratchet it down a little bit. But clearly he's very excited to be here. Excitement if you are a fantasy football player, the idea of drafting Dalvin Cook this year, provided he stays healthy, the fact that they're talking about lining him up as a receiver a number of times, and this could just be some crazy experiment to see him. Maybe you'd see him out there once or twice a game or something, but who knows? Kevin O'Connell is an inventive sort of mind when it comes to offense, and hey, if I want to put my best players on the field at the same time, that could include Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison, and then you throw Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen out there, maybe a KJ Osborne, some of those guys, and suddenly you have a lot of offensive weapons, and how many teams could cover all of those guys? Probably very few. They've even looked at the idea of right guard. There's been a lot of battle going with that. It's been a difficult position for the Vikings to fill. Oli Udoh didn't do well there. Last year draft pick Wyatt Davis hasn't really done what they were expecting out of him. This year they've drafted Ed Ingram. He's come in, and when he learns a little bit more about it, maybe he'll have a shot at it. Otherwise, we've heard the names Jesse Davis, Chris Reed. All we need is somebody to be solid there. You don't have to be extraordinary, but you have to be solid. More good news coming out of the Vikings camp as well is that they seem impressed that Kellen Mond has started to grow a little bit. It was clear Mike Zimmer didn't like him very much, didn't really want to give a lot of effort partway through last season. But, having a young quarterback is working with that quarterback all through the season, even as you're guiding your team and getting ready for every week, because you don't know when that guy's going to have to come in and play at some point. And if you drafted somebody, you want to put in the time and effort. And it seems like Kevin O'Connell and his staff are trying to do the best they can, because Kirk Cousins won't be around forever. And if you can say, hey, we drafted this guy and he's going to turn out to be somebody pretty good, that's a good thing as well. So a lot of positive vibes coming out of the Vikings camp. Eric Kendricks seems very happy, and he was very outspoken after Zimmer left, but he seems very happy about what's going on, and so that's a positive thing as well. A lot of things still to fall into place. We're a long way. There's going to be the mandatory minicamp coming up here the beginning part of June, and so we'll see how everything goes when everybody's there and what's happening and coming out of the Vikings camp as we start to think about football just a little bit. Let's talk Twins. As we talked with John earlier in the program, you heard the interview. He's very optimistic this year, and he's been watching the Twins since they were a franchise back in 1961 and seen a lot of things, but a lot of excitement around the Twins. Again, we've talked last couple of weeks about how this is a stretch where they need to play well, and they have been doing that. You have to beat these teams that you should beat. Take 2 out of 3 in Oakland. Great. Go to Kansas City, sweep the Royals, where last time you were there, they took 2 out of 3 from you. And really, in amazing fashion, I'll admit that on Sunday, I was doing some stuff around the house. I checked the score, and they were down a little bit. And I went outside, decided to mow the lawn, get that done. Came back in, they're down 6-0 in the 8th inning. I said, oh, geez, I'm not even going to bother turning this on. I got other things I can do. And a little while later, an hour or so later, I went and I looked at what the final score was, and here, by and large, they come back to win 7-6, a big comeback, all the runs in the last 2 innings. And this is the type of a game, I sat here and thought about this. This is the kind of game that propels you as a team. That you say, hey, we've won 2 out of 3. They didn't have 3 of their starters in the game, and if we don't win, it's no big deal. We can go home and not worry too much about it. But every game matters, and you come down to the end of the season, you think, well, geez, if we would have won that game, if we would have won that game. A big come-from-behind win like that with not all your best players in the lineup, really, even against a lesser team, really says a lot about this Minnesota Twins franchise. And they seem to be having fun. Then they turn around Monday night, and after Kepler stakes them to a 4-0 lead with a grand slam, the bullpen kind of gives it away. Even guys like Joe Smith, who finally gives up his first earned run of the season. Joe Smith's been a fireman coming out of the bullpen all year, and at some point you knew he had to give up a run. But things weren't going their way, but they still managed to scrap and claw and find a way to score a run in the bottom of the ninth. 2 days in a row at Kansas City and then home against the Tigers. Gio Urshela has come through to drive in the game-winning run. And here's the deal, folks. Everybody wants Royce Lewis up in the major leagues. And we talk about this a little bit. Where are you going to put him? You're not putting him in place of Correa. Urshela's been playing well. He's solid defensively at third. Do you just make Royce Lewis the guy who fills in for the guys who need a day off? He can go for Buxton out in center field. Who knows? If you read up on the St. Paul Saints, that's kind of what's been happening. Is he's playing a lot of different positions. So when they bring him back up, and you know what's going to happen probably by the middle of June, then he can, maybe that's his goal, his role for the team. His goal, too, of course, to make it back up. Maybe that's what they're planning on for Royce Lewis, because let's be honest, you have a playoff caliber team here, and when push comes to shove, you have to put your best players on the field. And if you get to the playoffs, you have to have your best players in the field, and Royce Lewis might be one of them. And I don't know on a playoff team that you say, where am I putting Royce Lewis in this lineup? Because I need his bat, but where do we do that? Do you put him in left field? Do you DH him? Well, then what do you do at catcher? Because Sanchez has been heating up. Jeffers has been very, very solid as a catcher this year. And it's a great problem to have, and some more injuries might come along the way. But boy, Max Kepler's playing a lot better, and I thought that wasn't going to happen until the shifts were disallowed, but he's finding ways to get hits. You got Garlick coming off the bench, just destroying left-handed pitchers. It's incredible, but whenever Royce Lewis makes his return, you can bet that they'll find a place for him, because it's exciting. And if you read the stories, and Max Kepler was talking about how much fun they're having in the clubhouse, he made some allusions to last year. It wasn't. It was everybody for themselves. I mean, my gosh, they've got a gong in the clubhouse to bang, to just keep things livened up after wins. This is the sign of a loose ball club who's playing well and has a lot of confidence in themselves, and that's a lot of fun to see. So the Twins going forward, hopefully as you're listening to this, we're talking about a potential sweep of the Detroit Tigers. Then you get Kansas City coming in again, and then off to Detroit for a 5-game series. And we'll see how the Twins' arms are at the end of this long run here. And that's the state of Minnesota sports. And now it's time for This Week in Minnesota Sports History. On May 25th, in 1977, the Twins smacked 24 hits in a 13-5 win at Fenway Park over the Red Sox. On May 25th in 1991, the Pittsburgh Penguins beat the Minnesota North Stars 8-0 for a 4-2 Stanley Cup championship. The last time we've seen a professional hockey team in the state of Minnesota, the state of hockey, in the Stanley Cup Finals. And in 1997, on May 25th, the Twins retired Kirby Puckett's number 34. I was at that game, got a chance to get some tickets, and back then it was general admission in lower left field, so it was first come, first served with where you sat, and it was quite a scramble to sit in some good seats out there at the Metrodome. And right nearby, the section with the golden seat of Kirby Puckett's. On May 27th, in 2006, the Twins beat the Mariners at the Metrodome 9-5 as Boof Bonser got his first win. Bonser, of course, came over in the A.J. Przinsky trade that also netted the Twins Francisco Liriano and Joe Nathan. During that game, the Twins turned a triple play, and Seattle still scored a run. The bases were loaded. The ball was hit, tagged the runner going to second, throw to first, so you got 2 outs there. Meanwhile, the runner has come home from third, and the runner going from second to third rounded third too much, so they threw over, tagged him out, and that was the triple play. But because the run scored prior to a tag out, not a force out, that run counted. In 2010, Jason Kubel became the first Twin with a multi-homer game at the brand new Target Field in an 8-2 win over the Yankees. On May 28th, in 1968, the American League announced the two divisions for the following season, with the Twins located in the Western Division. Remember, prior to 1969, the American League just crowned a champion at the end of the season, and Major League Baseball decided to split things up a little bit, add an extra round of playoffs, and of course now we have even more with 3 divisions and wild card teams. On May 28th in 1994, Dave Winfield passed Rod Carew on the all-time hits list into 15th place with 3,054 hits. In 2011, on May 28th, Anthony Swarzak threw one hit ball in 8 innings, the only hit the Twin would allow in a 1-0 10-inning win over the Angels. It was the first one-hitter at Target Field. In 2019, on May 28th, Devin Smeltzer made his Twins debut after coming over in the Brian Dozier trade. He threw 6 shutout innings but got a no decision, although the Twins won 5-3. And Smeltzer, of course, was sent back down to St. Paul. He's out of options now. The next time the Twins call him up, he's going to have to stay up or they're going to risk losing him. On May 29th, in 1982, Sal Butera set a Twins record with 4 runners thrown out in a 6-4 loss against the Yankees at the Metrodome. The Twins also turned a triple play on a strikeout and throwout of 2 runners on the bases on the same play. On May 30th, in 1992, Bert Blyleven became the second Major League Baseball player to win both as a teenager and as a 40-year-old. For our local listeners in the Richland, Heartland, Allendale, Geneva area, we have come upon spring sports playoffs. On May 26th, track has their subsection over in Mapleton, and good luck to all the tracksters as some of them hope to compete and move on to the sections and possibly the state track meet. Baseball is scheduled to have their opening round on May 26th. However, it looks like our baseball team will end up with the number 2 seed in the section, which will give them a first-round bye. So congratulations to the baseball team on a fantastic season. I got a chance to watch them for the first time last week in an exciting 2-1 victory over Southland. So that would mean that their first playoff game after the bye would be May 31st, and that will be in Richland at Jeff and Carol Reese Field. Softball will be in their second round at the high seed, and they will also play then on Saturday, May 28th at Caswell Park in Mankato. A fantastic chance to watch a lot of good softball with all the fields going at Caswell there in Mankato. A great opportunity if you enjoy softball at all. And then hopefully softball would still be playing next Tuesday, May 31st, competing in the section finals. Golf will also have their sections on May 31st at New Prague. So again, good luck to all of our spring sports athletes as they look to finish off the school year and their seasons in fine fashion. Well, that'll do it for another helping of waffles here at 365sportscast.com. I'm glad you joined us and hope you'll continue to tune in each week right here at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. Remember, if you can't catch the original broadcast, just jot it down. Each week's episode replays Thursday at 10, Friday at 7, Saturday at 10, Monday at 8, and Tuesday at 10, all Eastern Standard Time. Shows also archived to YouTube. You can go back and watch previous episodes with many of our fantastic guests that we've had on. If you have any thoughts, any feedback, if you think that you might make for a good interview, email me, waffleflipper22@gmail.com, or message me on Twitter at Mr. D1973. Next week, we'll dive back into the world of Minnesota sports. Will the Twins continue to play good baseball? Will the Vikings have learned anything from their OTAs? Well, the Lynx have turned it around a little bit and started to make a move in the WNBA. I'll have another special guest to delve into all that and more. Thank you again for joining me. This is Mark Domeyer, signing off with Syrup.